Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. So this is going to be my Burp Suite Certified Practitioner exam review. So this exam is fairly new. It came out in July of 2021. As I'm recording, it's January of 2022. I passed this exam maybe around a month ago, and I kind of wanted to talk through some of the points that I made in my blog post. I'll link that somewhere so that you can read the original review. So just to start off, basic information about the exam. So it's $99 per attempt. It's a 4-hour exam. You have 2 machines that you need to hack into, and each machine has 3 steps. First, you need to compromise a low-level user. Second, you need to escalate privileges to the admin. And then after that, you need to retrieve the file. It's in /home/Carlos secret. It's like that on every machine, and so you need to get the contents of that file, and that file is just a flag that you submit to complete the machine. So you do need Burp Suite Professional. You use Collaborator heavily on this exam. There's a lot of out-of-band interaction, so make sure that you know how to do that. That's something that's very important for this. A note on the proctoring. So the proctoring goes through Examity, and they are not the best. So when everything works well, it goes very smoothly. You log into your Examity account, it's linked with your Burp Suite account, or your PortSwigger account rather, and then it just verifies identity. You just have to show your ID, and then the whole point of it is just to verify that it's you that's taking the exam, that it's not, someone across the world taking the exam for you. So the problem that I had is, as soon as something goes wrong in Examity, everything goes wrong. There's no such thing as a small problem when you're working with Examity. So, for example, one of my accounts, I talked about this in the review here. I have 2 different PortSwigger accounts just with 2 different emails, and because of that, I have 2 different Examity accounts, and I still cannot get into one of the Examity accounts. I went through the password reset process, I don't know how many times, and I verified. I was intercepting the request in Burp Suite and reviewing it to make sure that I'm not the one screwing this up. And I verified that everything was going fine, that I was doing everything correctly, and I could not log into my account. So I reached out to support, and for 4 different messages in a row, they told me, "Oh, just reset your password." And that didn't work, and they would not help me further than that. I asked them to escalate the issue because something was wrong, and they refused to do it. They just kept telling me to reset my password. So I still have a Burp Suite Certified Practitioner voucher that I cannot use because I cannot get into my Examity account. Now, I purchased this on Black Friday, or for PortSwigger's Black Friday deal, so that was only a $9 attempt, so I'm not too upset about it. But it's still... that's $9 that I wasted for no reason. If I had $99 invested in it, which is what it normally costs, I would not be too happy about that. So moving into the next section here in this review, preparing for the exam. So this review, I broke it down into tips that you can use as opposed to how to prepare. And the reason for that is because there's not really a solid way to prepare, or that I can say to prepare without giving spoilers on the exam. So the way that this is kind of broken down is I went through the exam. I did not pass on the first try. That's actually one of the tips in there, is don't expect to pass it on the first try, because the timing on this exam is ridiculous, and we'll get into that shortly. But I broke this down into tips because the only way I could say to prepare for the exam other than these tips is just saying, know everything in web application security. And that's obviously not very helpful. So, for example, I wrote in here, this is from the blog post. I wrote, to be prepared for the exam, you need to have deep knowledge of the following: reflected XXS, DOM XSS, XXE, SQL injection, header injections, command injection, template injection, access controls, brute forcing, filter bypassing, CSRF, cache poisoning, cores, and request smuggling. And that's not an exhaustive list either. So there's a lot there. So the exam is based on the PortSwigger Academy, which if you haven't used that, it's a great resource. It's free too. So hat tip to PortSwigger there. They're amazing for doing that. That's a great thing that they do, and I personally have learned a lot from it. Now, if you've gone through those, well, I'll say this first. The exam only covers apprentice and practitioner level labs. So if there's expert level labs that you're practicing, don't worry about it. That's not going to be on the exam. I never ran into anything that was expert level, at least in the PortSwigger labs, categorized as expert. So the exam is based off those apprentice and practitioner labs. So going through those is a great way to practice. So I'm just going to go ahead and start going through the tips here. Tip number 1 is use the scanner as soon as you get into the application. So any experienced penetration tester should know you don't just want to go into an application and just start blasting scans, because you could topple something over. It's very noob, like it's not targeted. You're throwing a Hail Mary and just hoping for the best. But this is an exam. This is not an actual pen test. So you're playing a little bit fast and loose with the rules. I never had any issue with the labs lagging out. So my advice is, as soon as you get in, just start spraying scans out. Scan like the root of the application, throw a crawl and a scan in there, and just let Scanner have its day. While that's running, do your manual testing. I did not have any issues with the application being slow because I was blasting it with scans. So get your automated scans running, and then get your manual testing on after that. And the reason why I recommend this is because the test is very fast. You only have 4 hours to do 6 challenges. This is something that I harped on and kind of poked fun at in the review. 4 hours is not a lot of time for 6 challenges, 6 technical challenges. There's no easy way to get any of these challenges. So, I mean, you have 45 minutes on average, if I remember correctly. You have 45 minutes on average for each of these problems, and that is not a lot of time. You can easily waste an hour, 2 hours, probably not too much more than that, but easily you can waste an hour, going down a rabbit hole or something, which leads me into tip number 2, which is avoid rabbit holes. I wrote in here, how do I avoid them? I wish I knew. I really can't tell you how to avoid a rabbit hole, again, at least not without explicitly spoiling some of the rabbit holes on the exam. But there was one exploit that I spent almost 2 hours trying to fix. There was some like encoding issues, and then there was some character set issues. Like I was working really hard to try to make this payload work, and eventually I got it to work, and I was so happy about it. And then I ran my exploit, and I wasn't getting any interaction out of band that would have gotten me to the next challenge. And the reason for that is because I was blocked by cores. So I just wasted 2 hours making an exploit work that ended up being blocked by cores. So it got me absolutely nothing. So do your best to avoid rabbit holes. They are present on the exam. I wish I had a little bit more specific information, but I can't just because I don't really want to spoil anything. Don't want to make PortSwigger mad at me. So tip 3, know that the exam is sequential. So this is a really big one. If you read through the PortSwigger documentation on the exam, they tell you that it's meant to be, each challenge, each box is meant to be hacked in a sequence. So it's that low-level user, escalate to admin, and then get a file off of the server. And the reason why this is important is because if you have, say, maybe like an IDOR or something, or some sort of access control issue that would let you get to the admin panel, don't even go down that rabbit hole. Don't think about it. Because you are not meant to get to the admin panel without first compromising the low-level user. And believe me, I tried a lot to see if there's other ways. Now, there's a little bit of sneakiness that PortSwigger does here. There are some challenge solutions that should work on an admin user that don't. For example, this is not actually from the exam, but just as an example of this idea, if I have SQL injection that allows me to do an authorization bypass, then I should be able to get into any user that I know exists. So, for example, let's just say I have a classic or 1 equals 1 in my password or something, and let's say I exploit that and I get to the low-level user. great. So I should be able to then go back, change the username to admin, and then use the same exploit to get into admin. That doesn't work. They explicitly block that in some exploits. So you don't want to avoid everything, like every sort of access control issue, because some of those do get you into the low-level user. But if you can, so you want to go through the application, going through that low-level user to admin to file off the system. And that means that you shouldn't be looking for things like SQL injection a lot of times before you've compromised that low-level user, because you can just walk straight into admin with that. Or you shouldn't be trying to do, for example, like a Boolean-based SQL injection where you're pulling data out of the database. That won't work because you would just be able to walk straight into the admin account. And I'm spending a lot of time, I'm kind of droning on about this, but it really is important. There were a lot of times that I was thinking, what type of exploit would get me to the next step? And that is something that is really important. So once you've compromised a low-level user, you're looking at things like, SQL injection, CSRF, other access control. Like, you're looking for things that'll get you to admin, obviously, but those sort of things won't work on the low-level user. So as you're going through, I hope that made sense. I'm really trying to hammer this because knowing that the exam is sequential could save you a lot of time and a lot of headache, because it helps you filter out what kind of exploits to use. So moving on, tip number 4, don't expect anything to be straightforward. Yeah, PortSwigger is, they're clever. They're sneaky. If you go through the PortSwigger Web Academy, some of the solutions are really obscure, and I can't say that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's not like I expect them to give me a straightforward answer, but sometimes you have some really weird exploits, some things that you need to chain together, some things that just have really weird payloads, or you have to come at it from a really strange angle. I put in the review here, just, script tag, payload, close script tag. That doesn't work. Don't waste your time trying to just throw in those types of things. If you see like your input getting reflected, then maybe you could use that to use like a script tag to see if it's getting filtered, to see if it's filtered, see if you're triggering an error, that sort of thing. You can kind of see how the application is reacting, but don't expect just a straightforward payload to work on the first time. It is way more complicated than that. So if you're expecting it to be, like if you say, I know cross-site scripting, and you just go in expecting to throw some script tags around, no, that's not going to work. So tip number 5 is Google is your friend, and so are PortSwigger pages. I mean, Google is your friend in hacking, in pen testing, hacking, in really anything tech. Google is always your friend. If you see error messages, Google them. If you're trying to find a specific payload for something, Google it. If you're trying to figure out what exactly it is that you're doing, Google it. Google is great. Always Google stuff. The reason why I put this one in here, though, is that second part, and so are PortSwigger pages. So, coincidentally, there were some times that I Googled an error message that I was getting, or I was getting certain input back, or I was kind of Googling around for information on my specific situation. And wouldn't you know it, the very first result is a PortSwigger blog. So then I look at the PortSwigger blog and realize it is exactly what I'm looking at. And then I try the solution, and lo and behold, it works. So there are some exam solutions lurking around on PortSwigger blogs. It's not like you can just go through every PortSwigger blog, read all of them, and then suddenly you can pass the exam. It doesn't work like that. But if you are Googling for something that you are encountering, and within the first couple of results is a PortSwigger blog, you can probably say with a high degree of certainty that that is the solution, or it's something similar. So that would be the first go-to. All right, moving on to tip number 6, new functionality is the path. So when you start an application, it looks exactly like the web app security labs, but sometimes you have additional functionality that wasn't there. You might have like an admin panel, or you might have the ability to comment, and you didn't have that before. So the first thing that I was doing when I was diving into the exam boxes was going and seeing what was different in this box that wasn't there on the other box. It's not going to be like that every time, but sometimes there's a really obvious red flag if you actually look at the page. Now, I also did the opposite and was bad and didn't look for that. I didn't do complete reconnaissance or enumeration rather, and I was looking at the page and I was looking at something in a different area of the application, ended up being a dead end, and then when I went back to look on the page for other paths, I realized there was new functionality that I had missed, and that ends up being the path. So look around when you dive into the application. So start off your scanner and then start poking around the application and seeing if there's new functionality there. Because if there is new functionality, then that is, I would say 99.99% of the time, I mean, I don't know how many different types of boxes there are, but I'd say 99.99% of the time, that is going to be the solution. So tip number 7, approach the exam like a CTF. I'm just going to read the first part of this here. So there are reviews of this exam that say it is, quote, 100% realistic, and that blows my mind. All vulnerabilities on the exam are found in the wild, yes. However, the implementation is not always realistic. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the authorization controls. There were times that, like I was saying earlier, you'll exploit something to get a low-level user, and there's nothing that should be preventing you from using that same exploit to get to the admin user. Now, they block that functionality because the exam is built in a specific way, and that's fine. That's probably a good thing. That actually makes it a challenge, and you actually have to walk through it and understand what you're doing. That's great. But if you're trying to say that this is 100% realistic, I gotta say that I don't agree with that. Especially some of the specific filter bypasses. They're very, very specific, and some of the access control issues, they're very, very CTF-like. So I have a couple specific things in my mind that I can't share. I wrote this with 2 things specifically in mind, and I can't share them because, again, spoilers. But don't approach this like a regular pen test. Don't expect the application to behave like a regular application. Expect it to be something that somebody intentionally built to kind of screw with you. And I'll kind of leave it there. PortSwigger set up kind of a maze for you to walk through. So approach it like that. They set it up. They expected you to walk into something, and then they pull a fast one on you. Regular web applications don't behave like that. So all of the exploits are real exploits. They're not like made up exploits that PortSwigger came up with or intentionally introduced into the environment, but they are implemented in kind of a fascinating way sometimes. So I'll leave it there, and we'll move on to tip number 8. Expect to take it more than once. I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but 4 hours for 6 of those is really, really fast. I had to come up with a brand new methodology specifically for speed just to take this exam. I really can't say more than that. You'll probably have to take this multiple times. Unless you have been taking the PortSwigger Academy and you know every single one like the back of your hand and you can do it extremely fast. And there's even a caveat to that, because I can't just say if you can do all of the PortSwigger labs that then you're good. No, it doesn't work like that. Because if you go into a PortSwigger lab and you say, I'm going to do the cross-site scripting practitioner level lab. Well, great. Now you know it's cross-site scripting. You don't know that in the exam. So you have the entire attack surface and you don't know what you're looking for. And that's one of the big problems. You don't know what you're looking for. It could be a bunch of different things, and it could be on any of the pages. You have no indication. So that's one problem. That's really the big problem that I see with this exam is it's just too fast. I believe I read somewhere, don't quote me on this, but I believe I read somewhere that it originally was 3 hours, which means you have an average of 30 minutes for those exploits. There is no way. So I think they bumped it up to 4. Again, don't quote me on that. I think I read that somewhere, though. That might be incorrect, but I think it's correct. But either way, this could be a 12-hour exam and still be kind of challenging. There's probably some logistical issues with that, and maybe 12 hours is too long, because maybe at that point, if you haven't found the answer, then you're just learning on the fly and you're just grasping at straws, and that's not really the point of an exam. But I think that, an hour and a half average per exploit might be good. So that would be 9 hours. At least 1 hour. Because maybe you found a solution fast and you got it in 30 minutes, and maybe you got stuck on the next one and that took an hour and a half. So that would average out to an hour. So 6 hours, which is an additional 2, that's my opinion. You can agree with it, you could disagree with it. I don't know if PortSwigger agrees or disagrees. I don't know what the feedback is. I do know that, so I took this in December, it came out in July, and I was still in the first 100 to pass it. I don't know what number I was. I could have been number 1, I could have been number 100, but I was in the first 100. And that's months of a PortSwigger exam being out, and less than 100 people have passed it. And I don't find that hard to believe, having been through and passed the exam. It is quite difficult. And if you're taking it for $99 a pop, I don't think you're going to be too excited after the first one when you only get 0, 1, or maybe 2 of the challenges. You could get discouraged really fast, and you could go broke really fast. So, expect to take it more than once. Time goes by so quickly, and if you've been through the PortSwigger labs, the Web App Academy, you kind of know what I'm talking about when I say that you can get stuck really easily, and there are some obscure solutions. They're not bad solutions. I have nothing to say bad about that, but you'll get stuck. You'll get stuck for sure. So that kind of flows into tip number 9, which is document your successful exploits. I don't know how exactly, but I believe the machines just rotate. They might rotate in a circle. It might be randomized. I don't know. Contact someone at PortSwigger, maybe. If they're nice enough, maybe you'll get an answer. I doubt it. But you will see, if you take the exam enough times, or if you just get lucky, you will see repeat challenges. And if you get a repeat challenge and you can walk straight through it in, say, 5 minutes, that is a huge help. Because again, going back to the speed issue, if you can get ahead that much and then you can devote a full hour and a half on one problem, that is a huge advantage. And I guess if you take it enough times, take it over and over and over and over again, you get really unlucky, you could eventually just have solutions to all of them. So, like when I actually passed the exam, I still had, I believe, 2.5 hours left. And the reason is because I think four of these solutions I already had documented. No, I will not share them with you. Side note, someone actually reached out to me and was asking for additional tips on the exam. And I said, well, I put all my tips in this review. He said, yeah, I read the review. I was wondering if you could give me any more advice. And I said, like what? And he was basically just asking for answers. And I told him I'm not going to give him any answers. And then he stopped replying to me. So don't reach out to me for answers. I will not give them to you, even in private. But anyway, back to the tip, documenting your successful exploits. Yeah, I think I made that point already. You can get ahead and you could kind of create almost a cheat sheet for the exam. Be ethical with that. Don't publish your findings like that. Don't sell them. Be stand up, please. But they could be very helpful for you. I don't think, that's definitely not a cheat, because if you're the one that took the exam and you have that exact same problem, I say it's more power to you to be able to walk through it. So that's my advice there. I did have one other thing in this tip. Sometimes the parameter names are a little bit switched, or they'll do something ever so slightly different so that if you have your exact exploit and you run it, it won't work. And it's kind of funny. There were 1 or 2 times that I went to go do something and the parameter name was something like, I can't remember. It was like authenticate versus login, or parameter versus something like that. But they switched the parameter name. So when I ran my exploit on the exploit server, it wasn't working. And I'm like, no, this is the exact same problem. I don't understand. What is this? And I started reviewing my exploit, and I'm like, oh, they changed the parameter name on me. So I was able to switch that out and get it working. So PortSwigger sneaky. I think part of that is to it might be an anti-cheat mechanism. So if I was unethical with this and I published my findings online, or if I was selling them, they may not work because the parameter names will be jumbled. So at the very least, somebody will need to know how the exploit is working, or at least identify a basic problem like that. So moving on from that, just final thoughts. I think I covered it quite a bit, just the speed issue. Expect to take it more than once unless you are an absolute expert at the Web App Academy, and even then, it's still pretty tricky. I mentioned it somewhere in the article or in the blog that maybe the best way to prepare for this exam is blindly go into a practitioner level PortSwigger lab and go from there and figure out what the type of challenge that you're working on is. There aren't going to be logic ones. For example, the ones where you have to, the PortSwigger labs where you have to like get $1 million because you can buy a gift card at a discount and then use the gift card to buy another one at a discount, and then you create a macro for that. There's not going to be stuff like that on there. It is very pointed to low-level user, admin, file on the system. So those are my thoughts. I will link this article so you could read it. I walk through it point by point here. I didn't read it word for word, obviously. These are just my thoughts off the top of my head going through the exam. I have a feeling this exam is going to grow in popularity. I don't know if PortSwigger is going to make a change to it. I don't know if they're going to make a time increase, a time limit increase. I kind of hope that they do for other people's sake. I mean, I passed it, so maybe if less people pass it, it's more prestigious and good for me. But I don't know. It feels a little bit unfair because I think a really competent tester can still fail this multiple times. So anyway, like I said, I'll link this. So if you want to read the full article, you can. And then on that page, my LinkedIn is there. That's the only social media I have. But you can feel free to contact me. I only reject absolutely blank profiles because I feel like they're spam most of the time. But feel free to contact me, shoot me a message. The only question that I won't ask is spoilers. I will not give you direct answers, but I will give you advice. And if I get frequent questions, I'll add that to the article. So anyway, I've droned on long enough. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I provided some sort of value. If you pass it and if you gained any sort of insight out of this recording, I'd love to know that. So yeah, hit me up anytime and best of luck. Bye.